move. Next up in our AFC North preview is the Cincinnati Bengals, who for the second straight year last year, Dawn, missed the playoffs and had a 9-8 record. 9-8 in back-to-back years, missing the playoffs in back-to-back years to no fault of their offense last year. The 10th most efficient offense in EPA per play. The defense, though, they let them down time and time again last year. See right there at 22nd in defensive grade last year. The Bengals did a solid job this offseason. Gave them a C for their draft and a B+ for free agency. They locked down Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, what they needed to do. Hopefully, it sounds like they will lock down Trey Hendrickson soon on this team right now. It sounds like at least Shamar Stewart finally signed too. They have a great quarterback in Joe Burrow and great receivers, obviously, but some other questions around the team they'll break down in just a second. But, Dawn, what is the biggest strength of the Cincinnati Bengals team?
I mean, it's three guys that you just mentioned. It's Joe Burrow, it's Jamar Chase, it's T. Higgins. There is no question how the Bengals are going to attack it. It is through the air, and when all three of these guys were healthy and on the field last year, T. Higgins was dealing with some injuries. They went 8-4. Okay, so they can beat any team on any given day, even the best teams in football, just because they have these three guys. Joe Burrow was the second highest graded passer in the NFL last season behind Lamar Jackson. Jamar Chase won the Triple Crown, leading the league in yards, touchdowns, and catches, and T. Higgins was in the top 10 of receiving grade himself. He wins so many of those one-on-one matchups on the outside. That's just what you're dealing with, is that these are the headliners. These are the heavy hitters for the Cincinnati Bengals. Even for all of their other flaws, when these three guys are firing on all cylinders, they can beat anybody. They have an elite quarterback. They have arguably the best pair of receivers in football. They can score with anybody. They just have to make a handful of stops per game to help them out.
Absolutely. Yeah, the question mark is still on the defense too, but also the one question mark you really have with that offensive line has not really been great in Cincinnati either. Cincinnati's offensive line has been in the bottom 5 of PFF grade as a unit in 4 of Burrow's 5 seasons at quarterback. In 2024, they were 29th in pass blocking grade and 29th in run blocking grade. One of the 5 worst offensive lines in the NFL in both pass blocking and run blocking last year. They didn't really add too many major additions to that unit either. They did bring in a couple rookies, but they're more of day 2 picks than anything else. So that's still a bit of a question mark next year. Dylan Fairchild might, start for that offensive line. Probably will start for that offensive line this year. That's the one question mark I really have on this offense right now, is that offensive line has not been great in the last half decade, and it doesn't look that great right now either.
Yeah, I mean, that great might be overselling it. I mean, they, again, like you mentioned, bottom 5 in 4 of Burrow's 5 seasons. And the one year they weren't, they were still only 20th, right? So there's only one year where they were outside of that bottom 5. But I think that's really the big thing holding them up. And it's not just protecting Burrow, because the spotlight has always been on protecting Joe Burrow. Obviously, the torn ACL is rookie year, the dismal performance against the Rams in the Super Bowl, but it's just continued down that path, and they're not great at running the football either. It's not a real creative run scheme, and it's not an offensive line that moves people. You mentioned 29th in run blocking grade also. That makes it difficult. It just puts more pressure on Burrow to process the field quicker, to carry this offense the way that it needs to be carried because of all the other flaws. But look, I think, you mentioned the defense. The defense has some level of talent, especially if Trey Hendrickson is going to sign and play, obviously, and Al Golden's going to try to fix that. But this offensive line, you really feel like it's a talent deficiency, right? I know there's certain things that they've tried to do and just haven't worked. Orlando Brown hasn't been great. Amarius Mims hasn't been great. It would be much better if those two could play better this year. But for now, you still project this as being a bottom 5 unit going into this year because they didn't have any major additions.
Yeah, you're really hoping Amarius Mims, after his rookie year, can improve in year 2. Take that year 2 jump and become a really good right tackle in the NFL, because if he does, that will help out the offensive line a lot, but you're really kind of banking on that right now too, and also banking on Dylan Fairchild coming in as a rookie, as a 3rd-round pick, and being ready to start at left guard for this team. So an offensive line that's put a lot of pressure on Joe Burrow, but Dawn, he is handling that pressure beautifully. He was the most valuable quarterback player in the NFL last year, according to our wins above replacement metric. What makes him one of the 4 best quarterbacks in the NFL?
To me, it's the level of processing when he's reading defenses, and it just feels like he sees things before they happen. He knows when to attack one-on-one matchups. He knows when to attack certain windows in zone coverage. He knows when to take off and run for first downs. I think when you look at Joe Burrow and the way that he deals with all that pressure that he has to handle, and he's had to handle his entire career. Look, with this offensive line, his career could have very much gone the way so far that, say, Andrew Luck's did when in Indianapolis. Obviously, he had the ACL in year one, but we're lucky that Joe Burrow hasn't suffered another major injury. But that's because he handles that pressure the way that the old school quarterbacks did. Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, all those guys, they read defenses and they get rid of the ball quickly and accurately through it, right? Last year, the highest graded passer in the NFL on throws under 2.5 seconds, by far the highest graded passer in the NFL on throws under 2 seconds. He gets rid of the ball lightning quick. He sees defenses pre-snaps and trusts his instincts and trusts that he can make accurate throws, especially to Higgins and Chase. So I think when you look at Burrow, and it's not as flashy sometimes as Josh Allen taking off running or Lamar Jackson or Jaden Daniels taking off running, right? But he beats defenses and blitzes the old school way. He throws right over the top of them, and he's right much more often than not. That level of processing is really what makes Burrow special.
This might sound weird, but if you told me, hey, your team's going to have a bottom 5 offensive line in football, what quarterback do you want behind it? He's the first one I'll take.
I think you could very much argue that. Obviously, you could argue Mahomes, but even then, we've seen Mahomes in the 2 Super Bowls, and at times when pressure has gotten to him, that he will try to improvise and play hero ball a little bit. Joe Burrow is not going to do that. Not to say he doesn't have functional mobility and he can't work outside the pocket, but he just, to me, he does it in the way that Peyton Manning and Tom Brady used to beat the pressure. It's just right over the top of it, find the hole over the blitz where you need to, deal with that pressure, and honestly, if the only decent play, I should say, if the only thing to prevent the worst negative is to take a sack, then take a sack, because he's gotten even better. Still last year, career best 1.9% turnover-worthy play rate. He just does not make negative plays, and that's why he leads the league in PFF WAR since he's been drafted, is because there's just so few negatives. And I know, last year there are moments where he could absolutely press and try to throw balls into tight windows that he shouldn't, because he has to score 35 a game for them to win, but he just refuses to give the football away even when under pressure. So I mean, again, I think it's a great point you just made, because he's definitely, I think between him and Mahomes, those are probably the 2 guys in that argument of, okay, they're going to get rid of the football to the right spot when the pressure's on.
Yeah, I just feel like he's the quarterback that can handle that kind of offensive line better than anyone else in the NFL right now. It's worth mentioning the Bengals do have a new offensive line coach in Scott Peters, so maybe that'll help out that offensive line this year, but they're really needed a lot of significant improvement from that offensive line. They don't need improvement from Jamar Chase. If he does improve, it's unbelievable, because he's already one of the best players in the NFL. Jamar Chase led the NFL in receiving yards and catches and receiving touchdowns last year. He won the Triple Crown last year. Only the 5th player since the merger to do so, to lead the league in catches, yards, and touchdown. Explosive player. He's been remarkably consistent throughout his career. Chase has had a receiving grade between basically an 85 and an 87 his entire career so far. And the Bengals really rely on him, right? They really need Jamar Chase to be that kind of guy, along with T. Higgins too. And Jamar Chase, ever since his LSU days, catching passes from Joe Burrow, now in the NFL catching passes from Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase has really lived up to the hype that he had coming out of LSU, and he's one of easily the 3, at least, I would say the 2, best receivers in football right now.
And with each season that passes with Chase, and he's so talented. I mean, when he's got the ball in his hands, he looks like a running back. He's got the blazing speed to win deep. He can win after the catch. I think what you like about the Bengals offense and what Zach Taylor's done with him, he's really become the queen on the chessboard, right? Where you can just put him in any position and move him in any direction, and he can make an explosive play from anywhere. It really does not matter what route he's running, what depth he's running. If it's a screen, you can put him in the backfield and have different alignments with him. You can put him in motion. He's really the guy that the entire defense has to tilt toward, right? And then it opens things up for everything else, for T. Higgins, for Mike Gesicki, for Chase Brown, for everybody else, because you just, at this point now, it's not just like an X receiver like T. Higgins that just lines up in one spot and dominates you. He's everywhere. He can be anywhere on any given play, and that's what makes him such a matchup nightmare, is that he can win from anywhere.
Absolutely. So, Dawn, the defensive player spotlight is a guy that's still holding out for a new contract right now, but we're banking on, hopefully, the Bengals locking this guy up long-term. Tell me more about Trey Hendrickson.
Well, you knew when we lined this up that I was going to have to be the one to talk about FAU legend Trey Hendrickson, right? But no, I mean, simply put, he was very good early in his career with the Saints in a part-time role, and ever since he's gotten to the Bengals in 2021, he's been one of the elite pass rushers in the NFL. 5th in the NFL fourth in the NFL in pressure rate since he joined the Bengals, fifth in pass rush grade, eighth in pass rush win rate. He is one of the elite pass rushers in the NFL. He led the league in sacks last year, and somehow, look how valuable he is to this team. He led the league in sacks and was one of the best pass rushers in the league again, and yet the Bengals were still 26 as a team in pass rush grade. So basically, without Trey Hendrickson, their pass rush is non-existent, especially if they're not blitzing. Now we're expecting Al Golden to get a little more aggressive with this defense and blitz a little more, run a little more man coverage on the back end, but pretty much his defense last year was Trey Hendrickson, and that was it, right? I mean, he's just the pass rush arsenal, the get off the edge, over that blind side for the quarterbacks. I mean, it's just he's just developed into, even for as much as I hype up the FAU legends, I never thought it would get to a level where Hendrickson was leading the league in sacks and arguing over whether he was getting a $35 or $40 million contract.
Yeah.
He's just a ridiculously good football player, and it's somebody really, last year the defense wouldn't have even functioned at all without him, and we still have to kind of question if they could do that this year, because this has been 6 months of this.
Yeah.
Right? When is this going to end? Just sign your best player, because you won't function very well up front without him.
Absolutely. He's at training camp right now. He's not practicing. He's not suiting up, but he's at least at training camp. So he's there. He's just not practicing until he gets signed just yet. I think it'll get done soon. Hopefully, for the Bengals' sake, it gets done soon. But he is at least in the building for Cincinnati. A guy who could really help out on a defensive line is the rookie to watch. That is, again, another guy, Dalton, another edge rusher in Cincinnati, who had a long holdout. That was Shamar Stewart, but Shamar Stewart is signed now. He is practicing with the team right now. He was the Bengals' first-round pick this year. He is a freak athlete, man. He had one of the best combines we've ever seen from an edge rusher prospect at that combine. He is a really good run defender, 88.2 run defense grade last year. That was 6th among all edge rushers in college football last year. Still developing as a pass rusher. I know the 1.5 sack stat is the one that everyone keeps going back to. He is a freak athlete, obviously. He's still very raw as a pass rusher, too. And the one thing I'll say to kind of give Shamar Stewart some credit there, that A&M defense was not designed for edge rushers to pin their ears back and just go after the quarterback. They were very much focused on the run first and then going after the quarterback when they saw that it wasn't a run play. So he wasn't necessarily just going all out to get the quarterback. He was kind of holding the point of attack first, seeing if they're running the football. If not, then he's going after the quarterback. So he is still raw as a pass rusher. I'm not denying that. But I think the numbers as a pass rusher were kind of hampered by the fact that Texas A&M's defensive scheme didn't really allow him to go after the quarterback that much.
Kind of a theme that we saw with several defensive linemen, not just him, right? You think about Stewart, you think about first Arizona Cardinals first-round pick Walter Nolan and the year he had at Ole Miss. You think about Nick Scorton, now a Carolina Panther, and what he previously did at Purdue, right? So, I mean, you've got some guys down there at A&M who didn't quite rush the passer, at least didn't have the pass rush production that you might want to see. But look, Stewart, he's big, he's twitchy, he's strong, he's a very, very good run defender, and I think that's a key to this too, right? Yes. We can't forget, everyone talks about the pass rush. Well, you have Trey Hendrickson as one elite pass rusher already, but you also need to fix this run defense, and Stewart setting the edge can make a lot of plays in run defense as well. Like you mentioned, the 6th best run defense grade in college football last year. So I think, look, now that he's on the field, add a little more polish to him. Al Golden's going to be in a lot of those 4-man fronts. I think Stewart playing in a little wider alignment more often is going to help him set the edge there. And having him and Hendrickson, assuming Hendrickson can get on the field as well, that's going to be a big asset for them. I think Stewart, we shouldn't expect 10, 12, 15 sacks maybe early on in his career, but that helped that he gives them an early downs on run defense, right, and getting in that rotation and really putting opposing offenses in bad situations so Trey he can then tee off on third down. That's really what you want out of Shamar Stewart, I think, early on.
In a division where you're facing Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson, and you're facing the Steelers with now Caleb Johnson, they can run the ball a lot. Arthur Smith still calling plays there too. The Browns, with who knows playing quarterback with their running backs now, too. This is a division where they want to run the football in the cold weather, too. A guy like Shamar Stewart could be very valuable as a run defender.
And not just in that division. You look at most of the teams that made the playoffs last year. They were in the top 12 or 13 of run rate, right? When you talk about the Bills run the football a lot. Kansas City, they run the football between the tackles a good amount because they weren't that explosive downfield last year. You've got other teams like Denver and the Chargers trying to get better at running the football for good reason. Everyone's following the Eagles' blueprint now. They ran the football more than anybody. They won a Super Bowl. So everyone's trying to add balance to their offense, and stopping the run is going to be just as in vogue as getting it done on the ground on offense.
And the Bengals last year were 18th in run defense grade last year. So they were below average in run defense grade, and Shamar Stewart could really, really help out in that department. Because Trey Anderson, amazing pass rusher, he's more of a solid run defender than anything else. If Shamar Stewart could be a star run defender while he develops as a pass rusher for Cincinnati, that's very, very valuable for a defensive line that really needs all the help they can get right now. Before we move on to the bottom line, Dalton, the Bengals' best bet of the year. And Dalton, I cannot believe this is even a bet available right now. For minus 115 odds, you can get Jamar Chase to lead the AFC North, not the AFC, not the NFL, lead the AFC North in receiving touchdowns at minus 115. That's the bet of the year, in my opinion. Jamar Chase is pretty clearly the top receiver in that division right now. He shared at least a tie of the AFC North lead in receiving touchdowns in each of his first 4 seasons. It's one of the pass-heaviest teams in the NFL, with obviously Joe Burrow and T. Higgins and all those guys there. Obviously Jamar Chase, too. He is clearly the number 1 receiver on that team right now. And you have a division where there's not other like superstar pass catchers, like maybe a DK Metcalf, maybe a Zay Flowers, maybe one of the tight ends in Baltimore, too, like Mark Andrews could do that too. But man, Jamar Chase at minus 115 to lead the division in receiving touchdowns feels like a steal, in my opinion.
It feels like a steal, as long as obviously he's healthy and playing maybe not even all 17 games. Because you look at last year, he had 17 touchdowns in the regular season. The next closest player in the division was Mark Andrews with 11, and then T. Higgins with 10. So it just shows you, obviously, how much the Bengals are reliant on the passing game. And Jamar Chase, I believe he led the NFL with 171 targets. He did. He led the NFL with 171 targets last year. So asking him to just lead the division in passing touchdowns when you've got the Browns and their quarterback situation, the Steelers, who want to have balance and aren't going to have maybe the most dynamic passing attack unless DK Metcalf is the next biggest threat to lead the division in touchdowns, and then the Ravens, who on their good days, Lamar Jackson is not throwing the ball 40, 45, 50 times. They have balance. They're running the ball, and he's throwing it closer to 30 times. I think Jamar Chase has to be the prohibitive favorite to lead the division in touchdowns, especially when you consider, again, last year it's 6 more than anybody else.
Absolutely. All right, Dalton, bottom line time now for Cincinnati. They have missed the playoffs in back-to-back years with 9-8 records. Their win total is essentially set at 9.5 right now on most sports books. And our win total for them is set at around 9.2 wins, I believe, too. Is this a team that will, 9.4, I should say, is this a team that will bounce back and make the playoffs? Will Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins carry this team to the playoffs? Or are they in a really tough division? Are they in for another pretty difficult year?
They certainly can. I mean, if you get Burrow, Chase, Higgins, and Hendrickson for all 17 games, you can win any week, especially the 3 on offense. You can just outscore anybody anyway. And the number of games this team lost by 1 score, or they blew a lead in the 4th quarter, or they just couldn't get a stop when they needed to, you would think almost that there's some positive regression that's going to happen for this team. The problem is that the same questions we always have with the Bengals, they haven't been answered this offseason, right? Their offensive line still projects as a bottom 5 unit. Their defense is what they're really hoping for, more so than, there's an infusion of a couple rookies, Shamar Stewart, Demetrius Knight, and obviously the cornerback room is going to be a little bit healthier, but it's really more about what Al Golden can do with this defense and the adjustments that he can make, as opposed to what Lou Anarumo was doing last year. So I think the Bengals, look, when you have Burrow, Chase, and Higgins, you should make the playoffs. My bigger problem with them is with all of those issues and all the questions that we're still asking about them, especially in the trenches, it feels like there's a hard cap on this team unless Burrow goes on a miracle run in the playoffs of they're just not quite as good. They're not as well-rounded as the elite teams in the AFC. Maybe they are the 4th best team just because they have Joe Burrow, but it feels like it would be so hard for me to pick them to go to or to win a Super Bowl with the flaws that they still have, because they haven't added anything that makes you go, oh wow, okay, this is the guy that puts them over the top, right? Even the Steelers getting, obviously, say a Jalen Ramsey on defense, or the Ravens with Starks, and some of these other teams that make big additions every year. And the Bengals this feels like the same team as last year with a few rookies thrown in. I think obviously they can make the playoffs. If you have Joe Burrow, you've always got a shot. And in any given game, you get into the playoffs and it's one game at a time and you give Joe Burrow a chance to win. But this team they still have their share of flaws, and I think that keeps them from being a championship contender.
Yeah, they're minus 144 on FanDuel to make the playoffs right now. I'll be optimistic and say they will make the playoffs. I think they'll get enough improvement from that defense to sneak in. They barely missed it out last year.
Yeah.
Like, they looked pretty bad last year, and then they went on a run at the end of the year to just missed out. They literally, last week of the season, they missed out on missing the playoffs. So I think Burrow is going to still be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Chase will still be one of the best receivers in the NFL. T. Higgins will still be a top 15 receiver in the NFL. Get Trey Anderson back. Hopefully get something for Shamar Stewart. Hopefully the offensive line improves a little bit too. I think for a team that just missed out last year, I don't think it'll happen again. I think the Bengals will sneak into the playoffs this year.
The 12 games that T. Higgins played last year, because he missed a handful, they were 8-4. I mean, that's just how good Burrow, Chase, and Higgins are, that they can carry this team to 8-4, and eventually that turns into 11-7 or so in there. So I mean, you're just talking about the problem is the things that are right with this team between Hendrickson and his contract situation and T. Higgins and Jamar Chase staying healthy and Burrow being protected. It feels like there's so much that has to go right for them from what's already going right on the good side. Any injury at all to any of those three guys, and it completely sinks them, because they only really have one way right now they can win football games.
They started off 4-8 last year. They ended 9-8.
Right.
They won their last 5 games of the year, so they caught fire at the end of it.
And they won those last 5 because the defense in those 5 games was the 6th highest graded unit in the NFL. Right? If their defense does play up and they can and this is not a defense, I'm not asking them to be the number 1 defense in football. I'm asking them to give up 24 or less.
Yeah.
I'm asking them really to be average. This team with an average defense, now you talk about a Super Bowl contender. But they can't be bottom 10 on defense like they were last year. And again, it's always going to be tough with a bottom 5 O-line.
So I'm saying yes to make the playoffs. Putting you on the spot right now, will they make the playoffs next year?
The AFC is loaded. Man.
No fencing.
We're not doing that. We're not doing
no fencing.
We're not doing the prediction episode yet. I have to do that with Trevor at some point. I'll say yeah.
Okay.
I mean, because again, them not making the playoffs, I think, then turns to bigger questions about the organization, right? They really need to make the playoffs. They still have Joe Burrow. As long as Burrow, Chase, and Higgins are all healthy, play all 17 games,
right?
I'll take it. Yeah.
All right.